but very necessary at the same time that we raise our awareness toward going on in our own community. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up in a quick word of prayer, and then I'm going to hand it to Tracy. Lord, thank you so much for bringing us together tonight. I pray your blessing upon Tracy as she speaks. Give her strength and courage. In Jesus' name, amen.
Check, check. There we go. I think I hear me. Hi, everybody. I'm so also, as Pastor Chris said, very happy to see people come out on a Thursday evening. I know sometimes we get home from work and we just want to put our PJs and our comfy clothes on. It's hard to get back out there. So I appreciate you being here. And also, as Pastor Chris said, it is a tough topic. And honestly, sometimes my heart is really heavy driving to the place I'm going to be presenting, because I feel like after we leave here tonight, you will then be burdened with what my team is burdened with. And that's not a lovely thing, but it is a very important thing. And so I thank you for caring enough to want to be educated, and I hope that you will leave here tonight with some information that you can share with people in your circle and people that you have some influence over. So I'm just going to be talking through all of the aspects of sex trafficking, and sometimes narrowing that down to what rural trafficking often looks like, since that is us and that matters to us. I'm going to just talk about a couple things, and then we'll watch just a short little video. So Five Stones Dodge County has been together practicing in the area for a decade now. Actually, I think we're about to head into hit our 11-year mark in March. And we are a chapter of Five Stones Appleton. There's just the two of us, them and us. I think they've been together for maybe 15, 16 years. And we are all volunteer. And our name, Five Stones, does indeed come from the Bible story of David using 5 smooth stones to fight the giant Goliath. And we are using our 5 stones to fight the giant of sex trafficking. And I just remembered I have a lovely screen back there that I don't have to keep turning around for. So our 5 stones are awareness, prevention, education, collaboration, and networking. And that is indeed what we have been doing for over a decade. This is an area and a topic where we strongly feel and recognize that education really does and can lead to prevention. Because as you'll see as we're talking through, the more you know, the more your antenna is up, the less likely you, our youth, our children will be to fall for the tactics of a trafficker. So I like to start out my presentations by just getting a feel for what the knowledge in the room is. And so using your hand, if a closed fist is I know nothing at all about sex trafficking, and then anywhere from 1 to 5, with 5 being I know everything there is to know about trafficking. Can I just get a little feel for where you're all at by a show of your fingers? Okay, awesome. Actually, I love seeing less fingers up or closed fists, because then, hi Dawn, then we really are going to learn a lot together tonight, and it's it's worth our time together, right? So thank you for doing that. So I'm going to play this short video. It's about 2.5 minutes. This is from Shared Hope. They are not Five Stones, but they have a lot of wonderful resources online that we tend to use throughout the years. You can check them out as well. Their website will play at the end of the video. The purpose of this video really is just to get us all in the same headspace for the topic that we're going to talk about. So that we are kind of in that same emotional space together. So let's just take a peek at this. There we go.
Her story begins like any other. She desires relationships that are safe, supportive, affectionate. But what she took for love turned manipulative, violent, controlling, isolated, lost into a world of trafficking. Because buyers pay traffickers to supply younger and younger children. and she's waiting for you to notice. She's not in class. She's not safe in bed. She's not scoring the goal. She is being bought and sold for sex. But would you know it if you saw it? Shared Hope International aims to reverse this cycle. We educate on signs of trafficking, train law enforcement, advocate for stronger laws, offer shelter and services, all to stop the exploitation once and for all. So, she is in class, is scoring the goal, is safe in bed. Pretty simple.
So you'll notice that this story was about a young girl, but what I will say is that, and we'll talk about it as we go through the presentation, I feel like if they were to remake this clip today, they might have a little boy, because more and more boys are being trafficked as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through things. So the things we're going to do today, we're going to learn what trafficking is, why it matters to us, especially us here in rural Wisconsin, and what we can do about it. Whenever we talk about statistics for trafficking, it's never really the full picture, because in order to create a statistic, you have to be able to count something, right? You have to be able to know it. And trafficking is such a secret, shameful, underground, criminal activity and industry that any statistics really are probably less than the reality, and sometimes kind of a best guess, unfortunately. But what we do know, and the reason that we do talk about here in rural Wisconsin, is that it has been reported in all 72 counties of Wisconsin. And so none of us can say, that's a big city problem, that's a Las Vegas problem, that's a Europe problem. It is all those things. It's also a here problem. And so our job, we consider our job, I've got some teammates out there working the table, to be to protect people here, and especially youth. And I know that's probably the heartbeat of most of you here tonight as well. So you can read some of the stats up there behind me. I'm not going to read through all of them. I will say, though, that victims of trafficking can and are boys, girls, men, women. There really is nobody that is potentially off limits that a trafficker would consider tricking and using to make money off of. There's a lot of money to be had. So I mentioned boys, and when we started 10 years ago, the boys were, I think, about 25% of trafficking victims. So in the decade that we've been functioning and learning and attending conferences to grow in our own education, boys are at anywhere from 36 to about 45% of victims. So that's important, because I think a lot of times in the past, we were just thinking of the girls in our lives for a night like this. And it's time we start thinking about the boys too, and we need to protect and take care of them too. And I will say also that traffickers are more often men, but absolutely can be and have been women. And buyers, who we'll talk about a little later, are most often men, but absolutely have been and can be women. So all of those things, I also want to say, anything I say up here is never to shame men. We don't feel like it's us versus them, even though men are the majority of the perpetrators in trafficking. We would like freedom for everyone, because that would mean that we can actually do something about this problem. So the last stat up there talks about the average age that a youth is trafficked, and that is between 12 and 14. So I'd like you to just take a moment and, in your own heads and hearts, think of someone in your life. Maybe it's a niece, a nephew, maybe it's your own child, maybe it's a grandchild, maybe it's a neighbor, maybe it's someone in the job that you work at if you work at school. Someone in that age group in your life that you care deeply about. And I just want you to place them in your head and your heart for this presentation, because this is real, and those are the people that we want to save from being tricked by a trafficker. All right, so we're going to walk through the definitions of human trafficking and then funnel that down to sex trafficking, because we strictly deal with sex trafficking, anti-sex trafficking. Sometimes you have to be really careful how you word that. In the early days, we went into a Christian bookstore and asked if we could hang up a poster for an event, and they were a local bookstore, so they were very happy. But I went up to the counter and I said, "We're having a trafficking event. Can we publicize it here?" And I just went, "Cancel that. We're having an anti-trafficking event." So just being careful of the wording. We're going to talk about who the players are in the life, and that is what the sex trafficking world is called, the life. So we're going to talk through who is the trafficker, who is the buyer, who are the victims or the potential victims. So human trafficking is modern-day slavery in which your victims are subjected by force, fraud, and/or coercion for labor trafficking, which is work trafficking, and/or sex trafficking. We deal specifically with sex trafficking, in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, and/or coercion. Usually for money, but it can be really for anything that's being traded or needed. So we're talking about physical violence, we're talking about rape, we're talking about multiple rapes, sometimes gang rapes, lies, false promises, counterfeit love, things like that. And then once you are caught up in the life, it really is a 24/7 environment of fear and manipulation. So let's start with the trafficker. So this is the person who is selling somebody else for commercial sex or exploiting somebody else. In the past, you may have known that the trafficker was referred to as a pimp. We don't say that anymore because, so my kids' generation, they're the ones who did this. My kids are now 30 to 23. But when they were in high school and middle school, something different happened with the word pimp, and it became kind of, it means cool. Like they pimped out their truck. Your mom's a pimp. Don't worry about it. That means they really like you, that type of thing. So it was kind of hijacked as some kind of slang. That's fine, I guess, but I don't want to use it anymore because I want to honor and respect victims of trafficking. And so we're just going to call the trafficker because that's who they are. So this is the person using force, fraud, or coercion for the point of sexual exploitation and commercial sex. They have something to gain. A couple points about the trafficker. Early in our days of becoming Five Stones Dodge County, we were formerly Five Stones Beaver Dam. We rebranded because we kept going farther and farther out per request. But early in our days, we kept being told that Wisconsin's like in the top 5 to top 3 states for trafficking in the nation. And we just, I'm seeing like heads going like, that's how we felt too. So we asked a lot of questions. Why on earth would that be? Well, the proximity to Milwaukee really matters. And there's nothing against Milwaukee. I love Milwaukee. What a great historical town. However, Milwaukee has some of the most profitable and successful traffickers in the nation. It is known as Pimp College. It is known as the Harvard of pimping. Want-to-be traffickers come from other countries to sit at the feet of Milwaukee traffickers to learn the trade. And we're 45 minutes to an hour away from Milwaukee. So don't think for a minute that those traffickers don't think to come to small town America, small town Wisconsin, looking for naive children who don't have street smarts. Also, we've been told that we land in those top tiers because we have an excellent highway system. Good on us, but also good on traffickers and buyers because they need to be moving, they need to be movable. Buyers need to be able to get off of the highway and go to a hotel appointment and get back on the highway, not be seen in a small town. So we have excellent highway system, and we also have an inordinate amount of hotels off of that excellent highway system. So we just have a little bit of the perfect storm between Milwaukee, the highways, the hotels, and the corridors. If you go to things and attend anti-trafficking events or trafficking education events, you'll hear about the corridors. I can never come up with the numbers. I think 41, Erica, for some reason, I'm looking at you because you might know. I think the one that goes through Brown County is a big one. I'm sure 151, what'd you say? Yeah, up through the Dells, yes. The Dells, because of their major tourism industry, bringing in foreign workers for their summer, or whatever their season is, might be longer than just summer. A lot of those workers are at high risk of being trafficked, and they do get trafficked right out from under everybody's noses. So before we leave this slide, the top 3 avenues that traffickers are getting at their victims today is number 1, social media. So I stood before a youth group. It was all of the churches in Mayville and all of the youth. And I said, where do you guys go to hang out? Like, what do you do when you want to hang out with your friends? And they're like, we either go to each other's houses to play games online, or we're not at each other's houses, but we're together online, right? So guess what? The traffickers know that too. And the traffickers go where the kids go. So when the kids went online, the traffickers went online too. They're really good at knowing how to speak to children and not come off as an adult and not raise red flags. They're very good at knowing the lingo of the age group that they are trying to trick and use their techniques against. And so online works really well for them, actually, because if they're scary looking, nobody needs to know that. Okay. The second way is indeed still our neighborhoods. So they are still trolling around our neighborhoods. They go to the parks where kids hang out. They go to the coffee shops. They go to the arcades. Some years ago, I can't quite remember how many years because time just passes so quickly, but probably 6 or 7 years ago, a trafficker was in the arcade in the Dells and met a girl playing games and trafficked her. That's simple. Just striking up a conversation and seeming like a new friend or maybe a potential boyfriend. The third avenue is actually peers, which seems really weird, but it'll make a little more sense after we talk through kind of the grooming process. So we'll kind of bounce back to that one. So I want to kind of talk through a potential and likely process in rural America. This is not the only way that a youth or anybody is going to be trafficked by far, but it is the way that we think we hear about most often in rural Wisconsin. So, and the order that I'm going to kind of talk through this isn't necessarily always the order either, but you got to start somewhere. So I mean, it's such a crazy life as far as trafficking that, there actually is no order. So, we just do the best with what we know. And we'll talk through it and give you an idea of how this might play out with that child that you thought of at the beginning of our talk. First thing a trafficker is going to do is decide who is a potential victim. So kids who have not gotten any street smarts or have not gotten any education about trafficking are probably going to be more likely to be noticed by a trafficker in a game room, in a chat room, in a park, in a coffee shop, in a fast food restaurant. Doesn't matter if it's online or in person, they have their techniques for feeling it out. We'll talk about that when we talk about victims more. But when I was raising my kids, we would tell them, don't go, if someone pulls up and says, I lost my puppy, can you help me find them? That's a trick that kidnappers use. Don't do it. Don't go up to a car that pulls over. If a car pulls over and says, do you want some candy? No, that's a kidnapper's trick. So we felt that we were taking some of their innocence, but replacing it with safety. And we felt like that was worth pulling some of that innocence away. And we would say to our kids, don't go talk to the creepy guy in the alley, and we would just kind of have this vision of a scary person that would put even a kid's antenna up, right? And some traffickers are really hard looking and they would put those antennas up and they know it. So they send out what are called spotters. And it's basically a recruiter. And most spotters are going to be in their 20s. They're going to be very attractive. They're going to be very charming and articulate. I used to say he, and probably that's still the majority, that a young man would be a spotter looking for girls. But definitely there are female spotters as well. It would just be a beautiful woman in her 20s who is very flirtatious with a younger boy. So it can be both, but what needs to be said there is that think how easily that person that you put in your head could be tricked by a 20-some-year-old who seems super cool and wants to talk to me. Like, oh my gosh, he seems interested in me? Or she's interested in me? I could be the coolest kid in school if she's my girlfriend, right? This is how they work. They want to create conversation and create a false relationship. They know it's false, the youth does not. And then they proceed with that. And as far as they can keep moving forward, they will keep moving forward with that. Traffickers are very patient. They will spend months grooming someone. And the whole time, this kid thinks, I've got a new friend, a cool new friend, I've got a new girlfriend, I've got a new boyfriend, or I've got a friend online, and we've been talking and playing games for 2 months. Why wouldn't I go meet him? In a kid's mind, 2 months is forever. To all of us in the room, we'd be like, are you kidding me? You don't know who that is. But that's what they're doing. They're creating relationships. And they don't seem like the scary person because they're not always the trafficker. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're also the spotter. So the first thing they're going to want to do is create that relationship, gain some trust, start kind of gathering information about this kid, things that they'll be looking for. Are they angry? Do they hate their parents? Because I can just slide right into that situation and say, oh, I know what you mean. I hated my parents when I was your age too. And you know what? I ran away and it was the best thing I ever did. If you want to run away from home, I can give you a place to stay. I can make you some meals. It'll be great. So they're looking for the need, the unmet need in these kids' lives. And it could be anger. It could be low self-esteem. And let me just, let's all think way back to the great beyond when we were 12, 13, 14, 15. Did we have high confidence? Like most of us had no idea who we were. I'm still figuring it out at 54. So I feel like that kid that you care about in your circle, think about how easily they could be tricked. Think about all of the vulnerabilities in that age group. You don't have to be coming from a horrible home situation to have vulnerabilities. We all have vulnerabilities at different times in our lives, right? And traffickers are looking for those vulnerabilities, and they want to slide right in there and create a counterfeit relationship where they are going to say, I'm going to meet that need for you. You have low self-esteem. Trafficker notices that you're walking with your head down. Oh my gosh, did anybody ever tell you how beautiful your eyes are? And here's a kid who's maybe never heard a compliment in their life. When I presented in a public school for about a year so that we could get all the kids covered, in middle school, I just said to these kids, you were created for so much more than this. Like, you have such great worth. And I'll never forget, it felt like they leaned in. It felt like they all just leaned in. And I had this thought that some of these kids are never hearing a positive word. It's a dark world they're growing up in, and then you take that into the public school system and it gets a whole lot darker. And that's why I'm going to challenge you later to really be good mentors and affirm our kids. And they don't have to be yours to affirm them. You can just be that person who says the thing, so that they're not one of the people that a trafficker goes, this one seems like I could trick them. This one seems like they have vulnerabilities. So they're going to make those false promises, create a false relationship, and then start to isolate them from family and friends, because usually it's going to be a family or friend who goes, something's not right. Something's not right with this relationship. Something's not right with you being 15 and seeing a 18-year-old or a 20-year-old. Something's not right with your behavior. Something's changed. What's happening? And so they want to pull you away from the people who are going to raise the alarm. They want to be the only voice in their ear. And it's much easier to manipulate them and to kind of really create that false narrative and have them just 100% psychologically, emotionally, mentally in. So the isolation is important, and at some point, always, they will go from this false, beautiful relationship where they're feeling like a queen. He buys me things. He gets me clothes I could never afford. He just makes me feel so special. And then all of a sudden, something changes. And it might be you're in the car with him and he says, I really need your help. I'm going to lose my apartment or I'm going to lose my car. I need some money quick and I love you so much and I know you'll help me. I know you love me too. Will you just do this one thing for me? Will you just strip at the local strip club? Will you just dance there and make some money and that will like get me out of this mess I'm in? And if she or he says yes to that, from the mouth of traffickers, we know we have them then. I own them, they're mine. Because the strip clubs are a gateway to trafficking. If you can get them to go and dance and strip, probably that first night they're going to be offered money for sex. And the trafficker knows that, and the spotter knows that, and that's really the goal. So this small town mindset of the strip clubs, they've always been there, it's never been a problem. Literally, I sat in a meeting in the village of Kleiman, and a woman who seemed like she was maybe in her 60s said, it's always been there, it's never caused any problem, I don't know why we're fighting it now. And all I could think was, you don't know. You don't know what the problems are. I can give you one. Men addicted to pornography going to the strip club. There's one. Otherwise, they're not there. And again, I'm going to say it again. I'm not here to shame anyone. I know the problems are real, and it's because the pornography industry is courting men mostly, but women also, and creating the people who go to strip clubs, who purchase commercial sex at strip clubs, or who make trafficking appointments who become buyers. I say almost all of them because I don't want to be quoted, but I would venture to guess that every single buyer has a pornography addiction, or at least uses pornography. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Hold off till we get to the buyer slide. But so at that point, well, I'm pointing to that slide, but you're looking at this point. At that point where the switch is flipped, he could get angry, he could get loud, he could seem violent, it's scary, and so you're just gonna give in. You're just gonna give in. We've heard story after story after story of victims and survivors who in that moment, they were so shocked that this loving person was screaming at them, yelling at them, and then so confused because they don't know what love is at that age, right? But they're being told that this is how you love me now, or else I'm out, you're gonna lose me. I don't want to lose my cute older boyfriend who's made me cool and popular, right? And then once they're caught up in the life, as I said before, it's all about manipulation, fear, maintaining that control, because now that person, that kid or man or woman is a commodity to the trafficker, so they must maintain control. It's a very violent lifestyle. Okay. I also want to mention too, because just back on that screen, the last word says blackmail. So there's a lot of different ways that this can play out or evolve. And how many of you have seen the movie Taken with Liam Neeson? I think back when that came out, we thought, oh, that's trafficking. No wonder we thought it was like in Europe, right? Because it is, but abductions happen here for sure. But this is much more likely the way that it's going to happen. It's very doable when you think about it for a trafficker. Some of these kids are still living in their homes. They're not taken anywhere. They're not in what would be called the stable. Now, if a trafficker gets a runaway, he'll take him or her to his stable. They use equestrian language. The process is grooming. The girls and boys go to the stable where they are further groomed. But sometimes these kids are just living double life because they're in their home, but they're being blackmailed. And often the situation for that would be, I got a new friend, he drugs me, he rapes or gang rapes me and puts it all on video and then says, if you don't go to these commercial sex appointments for me and make me money, then I'm going to release this video to your parents, your work, your school, your youth group, your church. Literally, this is what they threaten with. And so I just want to say to any youth in the room, never believe that garbage. Always go to a trusted adult and talk to them, because even if that happened, it would still be better than getting caught up in the life. Okay, so let's talk about who's vulnerable, because these are the traits that traffickers are really, really good at knowing and looking for. Traffickers are studiers of human behavior. So in person, they're going to look for certain stances. Do you look angry? Do you look like you don't know who you are? Low self-esteem, things like that. And online, they're going to look for certain words like, I can't stand my parents, I want to leave home, I want to run away, everybody hates me, I'm not pretty, I'll never be pretty. So they're very, very good at getting their finger on the pulse of these vulnerabilities. So they're looking for, that's really small over there, low self-esteem, a history of abuse. We don't have time to explain it, and I don't even know if I really could, but kids who have been abused tend to be re-abused because predators have an antenna for that, and they know that that's a vulnerability. Kids in the foster system, it's not because anything against the foster system, there are holes, but if they're in the foster system, they already have vulnerabilities because they've already lived through some hard, horrible things, right? Or they wouldn't be there. This next one I keep on the slide, not because Wisconsin has a lot of natural disasters, because it doesn't, but just to kind of give you a peek into the mindset and the evil of a trafficker. They will go or send spotters to places where natural disasters have happened because they know there's going to be confusion, chaos, families separated, orphans made from whatever that natural disaster is, and they are going to take advantage of that. And they have been known to stand on the corner of places where triages are happening and say, I got a house going for people to come stay at while we try to find your people, and then they disappear. Drug abuse in the family is definitely a contributing factor. It's not uncommon to have someone in the family addicted to drugs, doesn't have money for their next hit. And it's super easy to judge this situation, but I want to say, when you're addicted to drugs, that is now making the decisions in your life. That is now leading your life. It's a problem. It's not necessarily that this person is the worst person you can think of, but they'll do anything to get the drug that their body is screaming out for, and sometimes that means renting out your child for commercial sex. Juvenile justice system speaks for itself. This next one, I guess, I always think back to when I couldn't believe that, like disabilities, cognitive delays, mental illness. I guess I had kind of that idealized image in my head of buyers are looking for the hot chicks, right? But the ugly fact is that some buyers want someone who can't fight back well, or that they can trick even more, or that they can get away with more, and there isn't going to be pushback. I watched an amazing documentary about that some years ago, and it just blew my mind. It just blew my mind. Runaways, 1 in 3 runaways will be approached by a trafficker within 48 hours of being on the street or sitting in a fast food restaurant for 5 hours and not eating. They know what to look for. They hang out at bus stops. They hang out at fast food restaurants. They look for kids on the corner, sitting with a bunch of bags around them, things like that. It's not random that they're finding them. They're out there looking for it. Any unmet needs, which homelessness is, poverty. But really, my biggest point is right there at the bottom in bold. Anyone can be trafficked. We have heard true stories about kids who, this girl was a cheerleader. She was taking AP courses in high school, on track to be a nurse. She was accepted into a nursing program for college, and she was moments away from being trafficked across state lines, which makes it a federal offense, which is good for the legal system, but it also makes it that much harder that you're ever going to see that kid again, because traffickers know how to move and hide and stay a step ahead of law enforcement. She was saved because her ex-boyfriend said, something's not right. I don't feel good about this. And he alerted her parents, and her parents alerted local law enforcement, and they saved her. And what had happened was this guy, she was a waitress, this guy kept coming in while she was working, kind of flirting with her and accumulating information about her dreams, where she wanted to go to college, where she wanted to live. And then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I'm actually moving there. Do you want to move there with me? And here she thought like all of her dreams were about to come true, but really he was a spotter who was about to traffic her. All right, let's talk a bit about the buyer. I feel like let's all together just take a nice deep breath, because I feel like just the heaviness of it, like it's tough. It's tough to think about. It's tough to talk about. And this is why I say, it hurts me to burden you with it. Our buyer is the person historically known as a John. We do not use that language anymore because we think the biblical name John is a beautiful name, and we don't think it should be associated with that. So we call the buyer the buyer. This is the person who is purchasing commercial sex. If we didn't have buyers, we wouldn't have trafficking. If we didn't have the pornography industry, we wouldn't have buyers. So our buyers are not the creepy guy in the alley. Any guesses why that might be? What does a buyer need? A lot of money. Thousands, hundreds, thousands. Law enforcement said, you can't believe how quickly they will run to the ATM in the police station once they're caught up in a sting to get $3,000 out to hand over so they can go home and keep their name out of the paper and a phone call from going to their wife. These are people with money. These are people with jobs. These are professionals. These are people who have expendable money. So these are people that we're rubbing shoulders with. If trafficking is reported in every county in Wisconsin, then buyers are in every county in Wisconsin. You wouldn't know. They're not going to look like anything. Do you know that the average buyer in America is a 35-year-old educated married male with kids? The average time that that 35-year-old male goes to sex appointments is either in the morning or at lunchtime, because they're not home. They're not leaving any trail for anybody to get suspicious about. Drop the kids off at school, go to a sex appointment. Go to work in the morning, go out to lunch to a sex appointment. Nobody's the wiser. It's incredible. It's incredible. I don't hate buyers, I just know that they're addicted to pornography, so I hate the pornography industry for creating buyers. And when I speak to middle schoolers and high schoolers, in the kindest, least harmful way, especially with the young ones, I say to them, you need to not view pornography, and if you're viewing it already, which a lot of them probably are, because the average age of first exposure for a boy is 8 to 11, you need to either don't do it or get off of it, get the help you need, encourage each other, tell an adult, or else guess what? Who are the future buyers? They are. These young kids are getting addicted to pornography, girls too. And some of those kids are going to fall into the porn system exactly the way the porn industry created it to be, which is Start here with a little pop-up picture in the corner. Get curious, click on it, look at some pictures, get excited, move on to little videos, get excited, do what you got to do. The body needs more, and so it's always being upped until, for some people, I'm at the point where I need to go act this out with somebody. I need a body. I need to do it. And there was a survey of prostitutes who, that's a whole another topic, but they were known as prostitutes, but they could very easily have been trafficking victims or somebody who aged out of being trafficked, and that's all they thought that they could ever do because that's what they're told. But anyway, 85% of the buyers, according to these women, wanted to act out things that they've seen on pornography. So I'm not making anything up. It's just, that's what's driving men and sometimes women to seek somebody out that they're committing a crime with and that they could get arrested for, and to take that risk. That's how bad it is that they're willing to take that risk. Ruin families. It ruins families. So people who say pornography helps my marriage, pornography is harmless, that is so not true. And it might help your marriage for a couple of weeks or a couple of months or maybe even a year, but eventually it's going to destroy your marriage. All right, so anything here I didn't say? No, I think we can keep going. Let's talk a little bit about the victim. So over 55% of victims are children. Out of that 55%, 25% are sold by a family member, for some of the reasons that we've talked about. It seems shocking, but when you think about the statistics for molestations, that's also often a family member. I mean, I don't know what to say about it. I think it's awful too. But it is what it is, and I think we just always kind of need to teach our kids so that they have their own self-regulating way to say no. I taught my kids when they were young, you always respect authority and adults until and unless they do something inappropriate, and then you can do whatever you need to do to get out of that situation. They need permission for that sometimes. So that second stat is old, and like I said, we're no longer at 20 to 30% boys, we're at 36 to 45%. And then, so when you think about the whole prostitute trafficking victim thing, we kind of put the prostitute over here, the trafficking victim over here, because we feel great compassion. Where did I put the trafficking victim on this side? We feel great compassion for the trafficking victim. Like, I'll do whatever I can to help. I want to, support organizations. I want to attend things. I want to create an organization. But the prostitute, well, I mean, they chose that life. So, they deserve everything they're getting, right? But the reality that we've learned through our years of studying and training in this area is that those two much more often and are much more likely to meet in the middle in this very gray area, where a lot of them had been trafficking victims and aged out and then just continued doing, as I said before, because it's all they think they're good for, it's all they know. Or a lot of them have been molested, and so their sexual kind of identity has really been messed with, and so they think they're taking back the power by, selling sex. But most prostitutes are not keeping their own money anyway. Traffickers are behind them. So just a little note to kind of change the way you think about that, because it's much more often meeting in the middle. And to think that they're choosing this and they're getting any great benefit, just this last fact on the screen, the average age of death if you stay in the life is 34, and you're 17 or 18 times more likely to die a violent death by murder. It's a very violent lifestyle. They're not having any fun. Maybe sometimes they think they are, but they're not. So why does it succeed? Most of the people in the room probably went through economics. I don't even know if they still have economics. I don't think so. But the whole profitable business model, right, is that you have a demand for something that you can supply, that you can make a profit off of. When we started Five Stones, we looked up the top 3 most lucrative criminal industries in the world, and they were drugs, weapons, and sex trafficking. About a year and a half later, we revisited those stats to see if we were still on track. In that year and a half, sex trafficking had bumped out weapons. So now we have drugs, sex trafficking, weapons. Why is that? When a criminal is selling drugs or weapons, he has to have a supplier, and he has to have money for that supplier. And then he gets his stuff, he makes his sale to other criminals. He needs more money to go back to his supplier to get more, right? When a trafficker has a human being, a body, that's a reusable resource that can be sold up to 50 sometimes a day. Pure profit. And this is why law enforcement has said to us, never intervene yourself if you are suspicious that you're noticing that somebody looks like they're in a bad situation. Always call us. Because a trafficker is usually armed and definitely will fight for that profitable asset that they have in that person. So it's all supply and demand, and as long as we have the pornography, we will have demand. I already talked about easy access and the link to drug abuse. Well, the other aspect of the link to drug abuse is that a lot of traffickers will purposely addict their victims to their drug of choice so that they need them. So even sometimes when a victim is rescued and you think, oh my gosh, they must be so relieved. They're out of the violence, they're out of the fear, they're out of the manipulation. Like, why would they ever go back? And sometimes they run back because they need the drug. Their body needs the drug. And the trafficker knows this and very intentionally perpetuates that situation. Yeah, we already talked through that stuff. So what creates demand? I've pointed to it a lot already. So I feel like this is not news to anybody that our kids are growing up in an incredibly sexualized culture and society. And we've got pornography in the big theaters now with 50 Shades of Grey. Again, I'm not shaming anyone. I know people who went, I know people who read it, but I once referred to it as soft porn, and someone called me out on that and said, Tracy, like, it's pornography. Don't soften it. It doesn't need to be softened. It's being normalized. Like, you only have to be 17, you know? I sat next to a woman at my kid's baseball game, and she was reading it, and they were all laughing about it, and I was heartsick about it because it's just all becoming like everything is about sex, and the lie is that women can use sex to take back their power by being in really bizarre situations, and our kids believe the lie that sex is victory, sex is winning, sex is cool. My daughter was one of 2 kids who made it out of high school with their virginity. And you know why they knew that? High-fiving in the hallways when they lost it. It was the goal. It was like, I lost my virginity, yeah! Because this is the lie kids are believing, that this is where the power is, this is where the win is. I don't know about kind of your area. I know Beaver Dam has Sensations, which God just keeps putting up our billboard. Like, we know the location of our billboards, but very often we'll say to the billboard company, here's 2 graphics, find us 2 locations, and then we'll approve them. Like online, you're like, okay, on 33, okay. You know, I'm not super detail oriented. Twice now, they've ended up across from Sensations, which is the lingerie, smoke shop, everything, pornography videos in the back in Beaver Dam. It's not grandfathered in because it's newer, but people are not fighting it either. And the first time, it it said it might be on the end of our screens, but it said something about pornography creating demand. And there was a big arrow on it, just because it was just the graphic we chose, it was just a big arrow, but it pointed to sensations right across the street. People just kept coming up to us like, that was so great that you put that across, and we were like, we think God put it across from sensations. So there's another one there right now. And again, I gave the 2 graphics. I did not specify where they go. One was about safety online, and the other one says porn changes your life, and changes is crossed out with runes above it. That's the one that ended up across from sensations. So, yay God. I do think we need to be more vocal. I think we need to be saying, I go online a lot, and so when the 50 Shades of Grey was out in the theaters, I went online and contacted the local movie theater. And why are we putting garbage in our local movie theaters? When the Today Show very giddily publicized it and had the actors on, and all the women who are serious journalists acting like fools, I contacted them and said, you guys are making a game out of something that literally destroys lives. So I'm pretty vocal. I think we should use our voices. I think now more than ever with the internet, it's very easy to let a company know what you think. And maybe you're just a drop in the bucket, but at least you're a drop. A couple years back, Chex, the little snack mix, put out a commercial where a teenager was at a teenage party, got his bowl of Chex Mix, and was eating it, and this very pretty girl walks by him and gives him like bedroom eyes and kind of follow me eyes. And he looks at the Chex Mix like to say, did you do this for me? And then he gets up and follows her to a bedroom. You can bet I was like online immediately. Dear Chex Mix, I will never be buying so you're literally, all the parents out there are the ones who buy the groceries. So if you're saying Chex Mix makes my kid have teenage sex, then guess what I'm not buying? I don't think I was the only one who complained about that, because it was gone in about 2 weeks. I never saw it again. So we need to be vocal. We need to fight for it. Like, it's not going to change unless we fight for it. And you can't complain about something if you're not willing to speak against it. So I challenge all of you, as you see things, some years ago, the Super Bowl commercials this year were really decent, I thought. But some years ago, like the Doritos commercial was a beautiful woman who bit into a crunchy Dorito and all her clothes fell off. And she had on like garter belts, and my kids are watching the Super Bowl. The other one was Hardee's, that I have never eaten at since because I'm just still so mad at them. But like, apparently, when you bite into a Hardee's burger, the wind comes and blows your skirt up, and it's sex, apparently. Like, so I wrote them, and I'm like, your burger should be good enough to sell themselves. I don't really see what a burger has to do with sex. I haven't been back. I know they're not really around here, but on a road trip, I'm always like giving them the evil eye. I'm Italian, so we hold grudges sometimes. So any type of societal family dysfunction like this is creating the vulnerabilities, right, that traffickers are looking for. This is creating the needs and the unmet needs in those kids that you put in your heads at the beginning of this conversation. As far as the pornography goes, we have on our cards out there a lot of resources that you can use if you're viewing pornography and want to get off of it, because our challenge to you is that if you are viewing pornography, you figure out a way to get yourself off of it, and don't be ashamed of that, but let it be a model to the youth that pornography doesn't have to control you or own you. There are ways to safely and healthily get off of it, and we need to break open the ceiling on pornography. We need to be able to talk about it in our churches, with our adults, with our kids in a very age-appropriate way. Otherwise, it's just going to keep happening. The secret sin is the sin that just perpetuates, right? Like, we need to just break it open. So if the porn industry is normalizing it all, then I'm going to normalize the conversations against pornography. I'm going to make that just as loud, that just as real, and start helping adults and kids to know they don't have to be a slave to pornography. There was a group of men who were in their 20s when they did this in 2016, I think. And they wrote an article in Time magazine. They came of age when it was just super normal, like, oh, now you can watch porn, do porn, get the buy the things in the stores that you didn't used to be allowed to buy. And it was kind of like a coming of age thing. Like my dad gave me my first porn magazine, that type of thing, right? And by the time they got into their 20s, they were furious because the pornography changes the neural pathways in your brain, and your brain tells your body what to do in intimate, loving situations. And so these guys who were trained on pornography but then found themselves in loving marriages, loving relationships, their bodies could not work at this normal level because pornography had trained them to work at this level. And this is the problem. And this is why we really just want to prevent our kids from ending up there. And then demand should decrease as well if we can do that successfully. Just a little more about pornography. I mean, I hit it pretty hard. I don't think so. It might have been Katrina or Pastor Chris who looked into the Thorn thing. I need to get that off of there because apparently he's not running that anymore. I think it still exists. Somebody laughed when they saw that last stats because they were like, "There's not 20 million hours in the day," but we're talking about globally. So that's the amount of hours being wasted globally with all of the different time zones on pornography. What a waste of our lives. When you think about what, like, our great-grandparents, how they spent their time, just working hard, being healthy, family time, but this is how we're spending our time. Okay, here we go. I can show you that's the one that was across from Sensations. Okay, things to watch for so that we have like action items. So depending on the field you're in, where you work and who you work with, but if you are ever like in the medical field or in the schools or anywhere, like even talked to somebody once who had suspicions and she was at a temp agency where you have like, for instance, a girl and a guy and the girl can't answer for herself. Seems like the guy's controlling her, he answers for her, or she has to look at him for permission to answer. That's a red flag, okay? Branding. The very successful traffickers will brand their victims for the same reason that a cattle rancher brands his cattle, to say this one is owned, this one is mine, you can't have it. So the successful traffickers, because we're all not high school kids. I'm looking out for branding. What is your branding on your sweatshirt, sir? Cardinals. Unlimited. Okay. And what is yours with the sunglasses and the hat? Okay. What's your company? I just did a little commercial for you. Electric One. And then I see the H, which I used to know what that meant. But so we recognize branding, right? It matters. We pay attention to that. Well, the successful traffickers will create a brand, just like Nike has a swoosh. And, I met a survivor who had a cheetah brand right here because that was her trafficker's brand. They usually will brand on the inside of the wrist or the back of the neck. Sometimes, if they're just really evil and outrageous, they'll brand all across a girl's chest. Really hard to get rid of that. This does not mean that everybody with a tattoo here or anywhere is being trafficked. You're looking for multiple red flags. You're looking for things that are making you suspicious. So please don't think that everybody with tattoos, that you need to check with them if they're being trafficked. But if you're seeing multiple things, you can say, "Are you okay? Is everything okay in your life? Is there any way I can help you? Something that you need to talk about or help with?" You don't intervene in the actual trafficker with the potential victim, but there are ways to intervene quietly, and people have done it, and people have literally rescued victims of trafficking by quiet interventions. Numerous unrelated people in the home, for instance, if mom remarries or just has a new boyfriend, and that guy moves into the home with his 17, 18-year-old son, 20-some-year-old son, who knows, and that guy looks around at the kids and says, I could make some money here. You start to lose control when you've got numerous unrelated people in the home. If you're in the medical industry or school or even just people in your kind of arena, multiple STIs, which are sexually transmitted diseases, or infections, STDs are sexually transmitted diseases. Five Stones, our parent company, Five Stones Appleton, got a call many years ago from the local Walgreens, and the pharmacist said, we just had someone come in here and buy 40 boxes of like Monistat 7 or whatever the off-brands are, 40 boxes. And he said, what do you think that's about? Well, if you're forced to have sex 10, 20, 30 times a day, you're going to have a lot of yeast infections. And so those boxes were probably going back to a stable. Fox Valley has a big, big trafficking problem, and they know it. And law enforcement is really on top of it. Super impressive. I don't want to give the impression, like law enforcement is doing an incredible job, and we've even just seen the changes in the last decade of the trainings that are happening and the conferences, and just, someone being tasked with, you are the person who is going to learn about this and that we're all going to go to, So they are doing an incredible job. It's just really hard to get in front of. So some things that you can watch for if you're in the school system or anything like that, kids who are absent a lot, or they have like a string of absences and then they're back, because there's somewhat of a local survivor who she was being blackmailed, so she was living in her home with her super successful attorney dad and her mom, but she had that situation with the videotape, and when he was making appointments, she would get on the bus, go to school, get off the bus, go to his car down the street, spend the day doing appointments, be back for the 3 o'clock bus, and just kind of do that on and off enough that nobody would really notice. So those are kind of some things to watch for. New clothes and jewelry, and like brand name bags that that this kid could never afford before. Just start asking some questions, like, hey, I noticed you have new outfits and this, Coach purse. Like, that's exciting. Like, where did you get them? Did you get a job? And they'll tell you, my boyfriend gave them to me. That is a huge red flag for somebody in that age group, if they're suddenly having things like that from a boyfriend. Multiple cell phones. I can't think of a reason that a kid needs more than one phone. I can't think of a reason. I mean, when we're adults, we sometimes have 2 phones because we have a work phone and a private phone. What reason possibly could a preteen or even a teen need 2 phones? A trafficker will give their victim a cell phone if they're not living in their stable under their control, and say, you will answer every time I call, you will keep this phone secret, and you will sneak out of your house to meet these sex appointments if I need you to. Significantly older boyfriend, we already talked about. The things that we can do to not perpetuate this, but also to try to stop it, are really, really simple. I think that's the beauty of it. We're not asking anybody, including ourselves, to run into situations and to run into danger, but it's really simple things like looking out for each other. And when we talk to students, we're like, look out for each other. They see things in their world that we will never see because we're not allowed in. But we can do the best that we can looking out for the kids in our neighborhoods. I mean, definitely people have noticed things happening in their neighborhoods that turned out to be trafficking. What if they would have raised an alarm, called the police? Maybe these kids would have suffered a month less, 6 months less, Notice things going on around you. And if you feel suspicious, you should not talk yourself out of that. And I've done it too. Like, we think we're being paranoid, or I don't want to be that person. Like, I don't want to be like Kravitz, right? Who thinks who's paying attention to everybody else's business. But literally, citizens like you and I have rescued trafficking victims because they noticed something and they have the guts to make the call. And the police have told us, we want people to make the call when they see it, not the next day after they've felt so bad all night that they realize it's time to start talking about it. Make the call. Make the call in the moment. Do the thing in the moment. And the police also know that, like, we have eyes in a lot more places that they possibly can. So they want to be hearing from us. So we have our hotline on our card out there if you didn't already get it. If you came through earlier, the cards weren't out yet, so please stop back at the table. On our cards is the national hotline, ways to get in touch with us, our website, our Facebook site. Is our new website on there, or is it the old one? Would you check, Kathy? We're in the process of ordering new cards to update. We used to just go on Five Stone, Fox Valley, Appleton, their website, which is awesome. Go ahead and visit it. But we have since created our own, which is Five Stones Dodge County. So which one is it, Kathy?
It's Five Stones Dodge County.
Okay.
Facebook, but it's www.fivestones.org. Is that our name?
Yeah, say it again.
www.fivestones.org.
Oh, no, so that's Fox Valley. And like I said, look at it. It's a really good website, but also go to ours, Dodge County, if you want to look at the more local stuff. We just challenge you to tell 3 other people what you learned today to spread the education, which will spread the prevention. And I know we've gone a little over, and I just want to have a little bit of time for Q&A. But please be a mentor in your sphere of influence. Please don't wait for kids to come to you to say, I need help. Mentor them, edify them, affirm them, build them up. I do like speaking at a church because, like, let them know they're sons and daughters of the King, and that so much more is meant for them than things like this. Okay, any questions or thoughts? I know it's a lot, and I feel like I just zoom through it because I have to. Also, if you think of something later, please use that info on the card, and you can email me or call me as well. Yes?
I've been hearing, well, we've all been hearing about the open border, or borders, north and south. But I've heard that 80,000 minors have been lost and are unaccounted for in this country who've crossed our borders.
Yep.
Have you been hearing those same?
Yep, and many of them are probably being trafficked for the same reason that they go to places of natural disasters. So I'm not saying all of them are. Some of them maybe are just kind of